Good morning, Raptors, and welcome to our MLK Day celebration. As you can see, we're going to learn about how Martin Luther King Jr. engaged with the world. Dr. King came into the public eye in 1955-56 with the Montgomery bus boycott. And as you can see here, he was very active after that, traveling over 6 million miles and speaking over 2,500 times, appearing where there was injustice, protesting, and taking action. And in those years, in 1963, in particular, he led a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama, that caught the world's attention. And that's what we'll be looking at today in some depth, is his famous letter from Birmingham jail. If we jump ahead from 1963 to 1967, there was a speech that Dr. King gave at Stanford University, and he said that the struggle today, referring to 1967, is much more difficult. And he said it's more difficult because we're struggling now for genuine equality. It's easier to fight overt forms of racism. It's easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. Dr. King said it's much easier to guarantee the right to vote through the campaigns he did in Selma in 1965 than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine, quality, integrated education a reality. And so today, again, this is 1967, we are struggling for something which says we demand genuine equality. Dr. King engaged with his world, and I think his legacy challenges us to engage the world in which we live. Now, before we go any further, I have to make a confession. During my first couple years of teaching in the mid-1990s, I really didn't know that much about Martin Luther King, even though I was a social studies teacher. I just knew it was a day off, and I knew the basics. He had a dream, that sort of thing, but I never really learned a lot about him. And a good friend of mine, Joe Dulett, invited me to a program honoring Dr. King at Boston University. And this is a picture outside the church where the assembly took place. And BU is a particularly special place for Dr. King because he earned his doctorate there. That's why he's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And it was just an Joe said, "Oh, you have to come, it's great." And I said, "No, I'm okay." And he said, "No, you really have to go, it'll be awesome." And so I went, and it was awesome. And it introduced me to the depth and complexity of Dr. King's writings, that there's a lot more to him than just having a dream, particularly the later years of his life when he spoke out against economic inequality and spoke out against the Vietnam War. I hope that our program today inspires you to learn a lot about Dr. King. There's a list of resources that you'll have access to at the end of this program, and one of them is this great timeline that I found recently. And as it says here, Dr. King was born January 15th, 1929. This is his work at the church in Alabama. And if we scroll down, we see lots of other things that he did. And our focus today is going to be on 1963. If we zoom in here a little bit, you'll see that he wrote his letter from Birmingham jail in April. He was released. Police used fire hoses and dogs against something called a children's crusade. The Birmingham Agreement was then announced that ended a lot of the segregation in the stores, restaurants, and schools. And the day after that, segregationists bombed the hotel where Dr. King was staying. So this is a very dangerous time for Dr. King, and there's a lot of depth to what he does. You may not have been familiar that before the March on Washington, he led 125,000 people on a freedom walk in Detroit. So that would be something more you could look into about Dr. King. So in addition to learning more about Dr. King, I hope that you'll be challenged to learn more about the world that we live in today and to engage a bit more. As you're probably aware, President-elect Trump is choosing members of his cabinet. He's chosen Ben Carson to lead the Housing and Urban Development, and he's chosen Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions to be the nation's Attorney General and to lead the Department of Justice. Our current Attorney General is Loretta Lynch, who some of you may know grew up in Durham, and she's actually the second woman ever to be Attorney General, the first black woman, and the only other woman was Janet Reno. And thinking about women is something that we're going to be doing when you go to the BBT, Black Box Theater, for part of the program today. Your seminar teacher will tell you when you're going to the BBT, but when you do go, you're going to see two fantastic performances. One is an original piece that Mr. Finley developed with his drama students that brings to life several speeches from Dr. King's life, and the other is an original piece by Junior Leticia Toussaint, who weaves together quotes from a variety of black women to deliver a performance about the challenges of being a black woman in America today. So once again, welcome, and I hope that some of the things you learned through this morning's program inspires you to learn more about a great American, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and about the world in which we live, and to try to make that world a better place. Have a great morning.